patch 4.7 is bringing a lot of cool balance changes to Legends of Runeterra, but it's also bringing 10 new cards. I'm TheSkilledRoy and I'll be going over each and every one of these cards today. First things first, we got Eris. I believe that's how you say it. They are a 2-mana 1/1 elusive with the ability to summon a random husk whenever you Nexus Strike. This is an interesting card that allows you to slowly gain incremental value with husks over time. It's actually one of the few cards in the game that can actually make multiple husks, albeit over multiple turns. Making use of this card will be an interesting puzzle to solve naturally because since the husk is spawned after combat, you won't be able to use potentially strong offensive keywords like elusive, challenge, or overwhelm until you get the chance to have your turn back again. Also add in the fact that this is a 1 HP unit in a format with, currently at least, tons of strong removal against small units, and it's hard to say where this card will end up naturally. Next up is Ballin, our new formidable overlord. They are a 4-mana 0/4 with formidable, aka the Galio keyword that allows you to attack with health instead of their attack. And in addition to this, Ballin also gives all formidable allies everywhere +1 health whenever it attacks, which in many ways for the case of formidable units is basically like a +1/+1 since they use the health for their attack as well. Now that is considerably powerful, especially when you think about the fact that this is repeatable and every turn it can slowly snowball into a larger and larger card, and it could be really good for all these formidable decks. But you'll have to be careful because right now in the game, there's a bunch of cards from Shadow Isles especially that have the ability to kill units with low power, and especially if you're playing Ballin without a backup plan, the 1-mana Quietus spell will actually kill him outright if you aren't prepared. Next up we have Cosmic Call. For 2 mana it allows you to invoke a 7-cost Celestial, making it similar to Glimpse the Infinite, which is another card currently in the game. However, if you like, for the low price of 8 mana, you can instead make all Celestials everywhere cost half. This is obviously a huge powerhouse move to go for, but given that the earliest you can actually cast this additional effect is turn 5, it's certainly best saved for late game decks. Maybe this is enough to make Invoke more of a scary archetype to fight. My main concern though is that you kind of have to be playing a great number of Celestials to really see the value of this, and with many of Invoke's best tools now gone with rotation, it's hard to see where this will end up or if it might need a couple more Invoke cards in the future to really shine. Next up we have a Crimson Landmark, which is a really interesting card, but it does seem better suited for Eternal rather than Standard format. For 2 mana, you make all of your future allies cost 1 less, which is extremely strong, but it does have the downside that now, anytime you play one, they take 2 damage when they are played, which makes it a little bit more of a big trade-off there. Now in Eternal, where Vladimir and Scargrounds are, this downside is less punishing of course, but in Standard, there isn't that many good targets. My initial thoughts was maybe something with Shadow Isles and using cards like the Undying, which you'll be able to play cheaper and then it'll immediately start getting the ball rolling with its Undying effect, but unfortunately your options even in Shadow Isles are fairly limited, so it's hard to see where this will end up in Standard, but I'm excited to experiment with it over in the Eternal format. Following up on this, we have the Faljord Bird, which is a 5-mana 3/2, which does 2 damage to all other units. You can kind of think of this as a 5-mana 3/2 that casts an avalanche on everyone else. And if you think about it, this card is kind of similar to the rotated card Blighted Ravine, as it acts as extra copies for your wide board wipe cards. Now of course, Blighted Ravine also healed you and activated at the start of a turn, making it very difficult to be reacted to, but this bird not only is a bird, which is actually probably going to be relevant sometime into the future, but it's also able to attack and block, which could save you more health than what Blighted Ravine healed for previously. Overall, it's an interesting card, and I think it could sort of maybe perhaps push more mid-range or control-based strategies in Faljord, as you'll have more access to more strong board wipes. Next up, we have this super interesting card in Vandal City, a 1-mana 0/3 that whenever a trap or boon activates, you add an additional 2 of that respective trap or boon to that player's deck. Basically, if you get a chime off your top of your deck, 2 chimes will be planted somewhere else in your deck. And as far as I'm aware, the card does not copy the initial placement of those boons and traps. So if you place a chime on top, the next card does not get 2 on top, those 2 just go randomly into the deck. Otherwise, this card is absolutely ridiculous. Otherwise though, it's hard to say where this card really wants to be. I think my initial impression is probably Puff Caps with a really good fit with Teemo, but it's honestly kind of hard to say for sure. Next up is a really interesting and sort of maybe complicated, almost Viego card. If I understand this card correctly, it's basically a 1-drop that will copy the strongest other version of itself when it dies into your deck, and then it doubles all the stats of all the other ones of that same card name in your deck. This means your 1/1 dies, and then it makes a copy in the deck, and now all the copies of that card are now 2/2s. This gives Viego, for example, a really strong strong scaling early option in the early game, and then it can quickly trade against a 2/1 unit, for example, and come back later as like a 1 mana 4/4, for example, which could be really spicy. Now, if you ask me, the best way to use this card will likely be like some sort of cloning method, perhaps, like good old Chronicler of Ruin back in the day, but this one's kind of hard to say for sure where exactly it'll end up because it's such a unique card to perhaps both play and deck build with. Next up, we have the Ilawy and Keg card. This is a 2-mana Bilgewater spell that deals 1 damage and spawns 1, aka summons a tentacle, for each damage you deal. If you recall the old card Boomship not too long ago, this acts as another way to pay off your kegs by allowing you to get a big tentacle instead. Now, for those of you who might not recall this card, this is actually very similar to another rotated spell called Vile Feast, but instead of healing, you get a much larger potential than just a simple 1/1, because now you can make maybe a 3/3 depending on how many kegs you have. Especially when fantastic keg cards like BB exist out there, you'll be able to make some really big payoffs for this card. Definitely keep an eye on this one because this is definitely going to be something that you'll see plenty of in the future, I think. And next up is a rather bizarre card, Valley of Imitation, a 3-mana landmark in Shurima, which is whenever you play a follower, it transforms into that follower temporarily, and it retains the granted buffs between each round. Generally speaking, this means you would want something with either transform synergies, such as Chief Nakotak or Big Game Hunter, which will allow those buffs to grow exponentially large. The only downside here is that you generally have to develop your board before it activates, so that means open attacking with it would never be able to really make use of it. But considering the scaling buffs, and it's only 3 mana, maybe you'll be able to get enough transforms that you'll be able to make enough synergies that it'll become more valuable because of that. Finally, the last card I want to talk to you guys all about today was Divine Draft. This is a 2-mana P&Z card that allows you to deal 1 to 2 different targets. If you compare this to, say, Make It Rain or Pie Toss, you can actually have somewhat similar cards in their overall utility, which is dealing damage to at least 2 targets. This is very similar to a formal card in P&Z, which was of course Static Shock, which also drew a card as well. My gut says this is perhaps a little overcosted unless you're able to target the same thing twice, in which case it might be good, but we'll have to see how things shake out. I think my only sort of concern for this card is that there's many other strong P&Z cards that sort of fulfill a similar niche, such as Caustic Riff, which might kind of push it out of play because that seems to be a much stronger card for you to be playing instead. But there we have it, all 10 new cards arriving with patch 4.7. Please let me know in the comments below which is your favorite. Do you have a deck that might want to run one of these cards, or do you have a deck for some of these more unique decks? Because honestly, I have no idea what people are going to do with that Shadow Owls card or the Valley of Imitation. It's going to be crazy for sure. But if you want to see my attempts with this, of course, I'm going to be streaming on Wednesday, so you can go check out my stream at twitch.tv/TheSkilledRoy and go ahead and follow me there, and I'll be trying all sorts of fun meme decks on the patch day. Or of course, you can come check me out in the Discord where I'll be theory crafting with the new cards basically all day today and tomorrow. So go ahead and check links to all those things will be in the description below. Thank you again so much everyone for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.